Welcome to NFL Daily, where we never throw the ball on third down near the goal line.
Oh, Gregg!
We're presented by Jourdan today. I'm here in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio, and so happy to be joined today by Jourdan Rodrigue of The Athletic and Colleen Wolfe.
You had to just start that way. I'm in the power chair, by the way, and it feels great. I feel alive right now.
So how are you doing?
You know, hanging on by a thread. What the heck? Everything, that game was such a roller coaster. All of the lead changes. And then at the end, I was like, all right, this day has been extremely annoying. There's a lot of things that happened that I just didn't feel like dealing with. And then it seemed like, okay, now I'm home. I took my makeup off. I have dinner in front of me. I'm sitting on the couch. The Eagles, they just took the lead again. And seems like everything now is just
Kind of
like
old school
settling
Eagles
in.
football. Long drives, tush push. We were back.
Loved it. Jason Kelsey's in the booth for like all of the tush pushes. Everything's lovely. He was in. Nick Foles is getting honored at halftime. I mean, this was a night for Eagles fans. It should have been. It felt that way. Everything was trending in that direction. Saquon Barkley, you know, he looked like really great, just like he did in the debut, and then. Yeah, I feel like it all turned around when Saquon had the touchdown that then wasn't the touchdown and was ruled at the half-yard line, and then just things sort of started to fall apart.
Well, they still scored. They
still scored, but it just
there.
wasn't right. Things were off.
Does it make you feel better or worse to know that with 1 minute and 56 seconds left, the Falcons had a 0.7 percentage point of a chance of winning that game?
I saw that.
According to Next Gen stats.
Yep.
Just wondering, is it better to rip it all out now or like just dwell? Like, I'm just trying to feel you out here on this.
I was so annoyed after that game. Like, I didn't even know what to do with myself. I was just walking around my place talking to myself. And I was like, and then I went outside because like the wind was banging something against the house and I'm like tripping over things in the dark, so annoyed about the Eagles.
She yelled at the wind.
I was yelling at the wind.
I love it. And, you know, if you listen to our Monday Night Football recap with me and Nick Shook, and yeah, that's a sad image. And yet I think that's probably going to repeated more and more as you get older.
You know what, though? I mean, you just gave Kirk Cousins too much time. Too much. They marched right down. It took like 2 seconds. 2 seconds. That Vic Fangio defense, I'm so annoyed.
Okay, so you know, if you're listening, you might be like, you guys already hit the Monday Night Football game. Like, first of all,
not like this.
Yeah, you know, we were doing therapy last week. This feels like a little extension of that therapy. But the more I thought about it, I was like, I feel like the 2024 season started on Monday night. I was pretty disappointed in that game too. I had the Eagles winning. I kind of am a closet Eagles guy. Like, I like that team, and it was just a moment where it was like, oh yeah, this is what the NFL season is kind of about. And actually, then I thought back to it. The first 2 weeks didn't quite have those moments, those games. Like, this is the game we're going to remember all season. And then I just thought about the poetry of it all and how like the NFL has
I hate this poem.
A long life. I do too. But Nick Foles is there in the building. Okay, it's Nick Foles night. Meanwhile, Matt Ryan is on the Manning cast as it's happening, the old Falcons quarterback, and saying, oh, when you're in a 2-minute drill, that's actually the easiest time for a new quarterback because it's the simpler plays. I was like, great point, Matt Ryan. And then I'm thinking back to when I was in the link last. Not last, but
it is about you.
It is about me. And that was Matt Ryan versus Nick Foles. And at the very end of the game, they're inside the 10-yard line. And Matt Ryan has Julio Jones wide open.
Oh, I know exactly what
on first down for a touchdown that would have ended Nick Foles and his Super Bowl run before it even happened. A couple plays later, they don't get it on fourth down either. And it's like Eagles, Falcons. I don't know. It all was happening.
There would be no statue.
I know. You're right. Everything would be so different. And I was thinking about Saquon after playing so many years as a Giant against the Eagles in that building, and now this was his first night in prime time in an Eagles uniform, playing in front of like his new fan base, and he goes from almost scoring that touchdown. He would have had a touchdown and would have been able to ice the game at the end, to having an absolutely horrific drop that then ended up costing the Eagles. And many other things played into that. But it was just such a turn of events, specifically for Saquon, too.
On the Falcons side, too, the going into a 2-minute like that was the best thing that probably could have happened for Kirk Cousins. Not just because of what you and Matt Ryan said about you're just not thinking, you're just
I just stole Matt Ryan.
Yourself and Matt Ryan on equal standing there in this conversation. But it also, you could tell the way that he was dropping back, the way that he was executing, the way that he was getting down the field. He wasn't thinking about his leg. Every other throw he made in that game, he was very clearly thinking
you were pretty
about
down
his
on
leg.
Kirk. You were like, let's, just reading between the lines that it was maybe not as encouraging a performance as people were trying to.
No, but you know what?
He looked great on that drive.
Yeah, that drive. And again, because he was playing instinctually and free. He wasn't overthinking about his leg every time he dropped back, every time he hands off, finally play action. All of those things that we didn't see in week 1. But you could still tell he was moving and thinking and overthinking that entire game. And then 40 seconds left.
The vibes.
I can't.
The vibes are troubling.
Then at the end, like after the game, you have Nick Sirianni talking about, on that call, there's a mechanism where if Jalen doesn't have what he wants, he just like takes the sack and falls down.
I'm
it's
curious
like, are you throwing Jalen under the bus?
No, he's not. People I saw that. Like, why are you even saying that? Because it's obvious, and the question was asked to him. And they even said that on the broadcast. Like, of course he says if it's not there, just slide. All right, we'll move on for your sake. For your
this has set a great tone.
She's a judge later, right? Like,
so that is why
you look really nice today.
Colleen is in the power chair. Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate all the new subscribers, and you can like and check us out there. But yeah, for everyone, it is Judge Connie Day, so we wanted to put her in the power chair for later. But first, we're going to do just a little bit of news. Found out on Tuesday afternoon, just before we taped, that Tua Tagovailoa is indeed going to injured reserve. Our Ian Rappaport had that first. That means that Tua is not eligible to return to the field until week 8 at the earliest. The Dolphins are prioritizing his health, according to Ian, and there is no timeline being placed on his potential return. But the earliest possible return would be week 8, and that's 4 games, and that's Skylar Thompson trying to keep this season afloat.
Look at the language on this, even in the leak of it, or even in what will officially become the announcement from the team, because sometimes you can place a player like with an ankle injury, for example, on injured reserve and immediately have the like little / designated to return also assigned to them. It's not officially designating them to return, but it sort of puts it in the ether. It sort of puts it in the air that like, hey, this isn't season ending. With this, you could tell the language is just a lot more careful. The language of it itself is saying, okay, he's going on injured reserve, and this in a way protects him maybe from himself a little bit, because there were also leaks and reports about how he's not planning on walking away. And Mike McDaniel's been very emphatic about how, hey, he needs to make his decision, take the time with the doctors. But when you are designated to injured reserve, there's nothing you can do about it. You got to get better. Mm-hmm. You got to rest. You got to get better. You got to figure some stuff out, and then not immediately placing that sort of language around. But then, that also sort of sends a very subtle signal that like, hey, give it time.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I saw this, that, okay, they're obviously protecting Tua, but it's almost like when you're in an argument with someone and you give yourself, let's just like cool down. Let's not make any like important decisions right now or rash decisions right now. Let's all just like take a time out and come back to this. And this is just a prolonged timeout for Tua at this point. And who knows what he's going to decide, but I just have to think, being such a competitive player, I don't know if he's going to retire. And that is something that he's going to have to figure out with his family and his teammates and everything else. But I'm glad that they're doing this and putting him on IR so he can't make any decisions.
Yeah.
It is a little different situation than the last time,
Yeah.
He had this concussion. He was in the locker room on Monday. He was in the locker room last week. They said he was in good spirits. He's talking to his teammates. Not all concussions are equal. Not all concussion histories are equal. And so it's up to Tua, but it's more up to the doctors. And they, did do further evaluations. And after those further evaluations, it's telling that they put him on injured reserve. But, some people, like Derek Carr had 2 concussions in pretty quick succession last year. I feel and that happens, and then he would just return to the field. So not every situation is the same, but we've obviously followed the Tua situation very closely in his, you can even just see on the field. It's a very serious situation, and you do wonder if the situation for their team is a factor on whether he returns to the field or not. You would hope not, that ultimately it's going to be about health first and foremost. They're at Seattle this week, Tennessee, at the Patriots, then a bye, and then at the Colts. So they will have Skylar Thompson try to, pilot a team that to me had some real concerns over the first 2 weeks, even if Tua Tagovailoa was healthy.
Yeah, the offensive line is in dire straits. The receivers don't look fully healthy. It's just, there's already concerns with this team, and particularly the main concern, the major thing is that Tua figures out what the steps will be for him to be okay.
What if Ryan Tannehill's still out there as a free agent? What if Ryan Tannehill completes the circle, goes back to Miami?
It doesn't seem like they're interested, and maybe he wouldn't be like a great fit for what Mike McDaniel does.
No,
I don't know. I mean, that would be up to Mike McDaniel. I could imagine it. I mean, he was pretty good in play action and all that.
I think Tannehill would be a fit,
but he's also not Ryan Tannehill that you remember. His last handful of games for the Titans, and I was a big Ryan Tannehill guy overall. He was not the same guy. They signed Tyler Huntley, who's going to back up Skylar Thompson. I don't know if the difference between Tyler Huntley, Skylar Thompson, and Ryan Tannehill is big enough in Miami's mind to bother, because he would cost a lot of money.
There's also the matter of what would Ryan Tannehill want? He was sort of public earlier this year about it being, if he was going to go somewhere, it would have to be the right deal. It's well, if you're not desperate enough yet to offer him a little bump in that money, then, it's speculation, obviously, but it's also two people get to decide on this.
It's a good position to be in. Yeah. Ryan Tannehill only come for the absolute right situation. I guess Tom Brady's not returning. That was the one I was more interested
Gregg held out hope.
This would be spicy. Bryce Young, we talked about it on Monday night's show, but Jourdan, I thought you had
we were texting
points about the whole Bryce Young fiasco. I'm ready to call it a fiasco because I have my doubts that he's going to play again for the Panthers.
Yeah, I think two things will happen now. One is really irritating, and the other is super intriguing. I think the irritating thing is you'll start to, particularly this weekend when Andy Dalton returns as a starter, and then through the week, and even frankly up to the trade deadline, most likely, you'll start to have these reports leak out. Oftentimes it'll be the coach is talking to someone, or the assistant, or the GM, or someone in the building is talking to someone about how it was the best situation for quote unquote the locker room. How it certainly is very obvious that Bryce Young was not giving them a better chance of winning than they had already. He was not playing well, so let's hold that as a truth. But he's playing worse than 2023. But also the same head coach who is making this decision 2 games in took this job with all that tape that was available in 2023, and took this job knowing that his number one task was to be to either get a fair assessment of Bryce Young in live action football, and B, to fix him. There was a huge fanfare. I have not seen
That's why he got hired.
I haven't seen any development in Bryce Young, and he in fact he looks like he's regressed a little bit, and I think that I think there's even less help in that offense, but that doesn't excuse Bryce Young for any of the poor play. But it's you took the job with the premise of fixing the quarterback, and you can back right out of that situation. So can the owner and the GM who made the decision, enabled the decision in the case of Dan Morgan, who wasn't the GM at the time.
Right.
Was in the building and was high up.
Was the assistant GM, wasn't he?
Yeah. And you've ripped through multiple coaching staffs, trying to figure this thing out. Ripped through multiple pro scouting department personnel, and at a certain point, you're basically able to just pull the old switcheroo two games in, and maybe it's for the best for Bryce's confidence. Maybe there's a lot of other reasons involved, but you're going to start seeing this irritating thing where it's the coach who took the job to fix the player is suddenly completely removed from the situation in which the player was failed to be fixed, if that makes sense. And that's the irritating thing. And I'll get to the intriguing thing in a minute, but I want to hear what you guys think about it.
Well, no, it's just that's why they brought him in. He had this track record with Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith before that. And I guess in all of this, the one thing I've learned is that the Panthers are an organization that has patience. I mean, are you kidding me? 2 weeks in, this is what you do? I understand this is a bad situation for Bryce Young. He looks like he has lost all of his confidence. And honestly, who wouldn't at this point? But they made all of these quote unquote additions and put in all of these resources in the offseason to help out Bryce Young, traded for Deontay Johnson, drafted Xavier Legette. They tried to improve the interior of that offensive line. Nothing has helped. Bring in Dave Canales, all of it. And it just feels so reactionary to do this 18 starts into his career, but also 2 starts into the season.
But I think it was two things can be true. I think it was the right decision.
Yeah,
I agree.
Now, and that they deserve a good chunk of the blame too for not being able to deliver on what Dave Canales promised essentially when he took the job and not, building the right structure around him. Ollie Connolly, who's been on this show a couple times and does a great job. You should check out his read optional Substack.
I love it.
As I'm going to take his point here, which before the season started, he thought this offense made no sense for Bryce Young because it's like a Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, counting on a guy to be able to throw the ball deep, and that, just wasn't going to be his strength. I don't know what his strengths were, but it would be a sort of a point guard type of offense where the ball's coming out quick and, you're an empty and all this stuff. And maybe that would have its problems as well, but that he just didn't seem like a fit, and they were trying to fit him into an offense where they need a guy
you
with a skill
can't say
set
you're
that
going to
he
fix
literally
someone
doesn't
if
have.
you're trying to force a square peg into a round hole. You can't come in, fans are blaring, whatever, like sirens going off, celebrating, that you're going to come in and fix somebody if you're fitting. I agree with Ollie's point on that, and it's a great Substack. I read it all the time. I'm a subscriber, but it's if you're fitting a square peg into a round hole and not figuring out how to reshape the peg or the hole, that at the foundation point, that's the problem. And I think it's the height of hubris also, if you're going to come in and be a first-time head coach and not know that you actually won't get any time to develop the quarterback. Those guys have no time to do anything. They have no time to actually sit and coach from the ground up. That there are so many other things you have to do as the head coach of a football team. You are running the organization, less so the time that you're taking throughout every piece of the week to game plan and to strategize and to do media and to sit in production meetings and to run other meetings and to do all of these things.
The height of hubris. That's
you're not,
band name.
I'm saying for any coach, not just this one, for any coach, they need to know this when they're going into it, exactly how little time you're going to get to spend with that quarterback if you think you are going to, quote unquote, fix or develop someone. I think the intriguing thing about all of this, I do applaud if they think that this is not a situation that can continue. I do applaud the fact that they're just making a quick decision and going to try to move on, especially before the trade deadline. I feel like making this decision now, the intriguing thing about this for my second point is that this sends a signal to other teams. Other teams, by the way, in a league that is filled with people who think, I can fix him, like we did an entire segment on a couple weeks ago, and people who eyeball the cheap contract. And I wouldn't be surprised if benching him is in part a signal that he is open and available for trade. The other part is benching him is because he was playing terribly and the offense was not a fit for him and his confidence was shot. And if you do move him, I do applaud, the owner and the GM for that, because when you mess up so obviously, and again, you run through all of those staffers just to fix this one decision that the organization made, you have to move quickly and you have to move without regret and without looking back, and you have to immediately set a new course and a new path. And that might be what's happening here.
This is going to go down as one of the worst trades in NFL history.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that they still have a second-round pick that they're sending to Chicago in this year's draft, they're still
Here's the thing,
though,
almost every team was going to take him. So I put this trade in a slightly different bucket than, let's say, the Deshaun Watson trade or the Russell Wilson trade. Those, to me, are truly disastrous trades because you kind of knew what you were getting. Most teams have traded this amount of players. Now, the DJ Moore throwing it in was a little crazy, but the evaluation was the problem. And I also think multiple things can be true. I see a lot of the draft Nick types getting really mad about how the Panthers have blown this at every turn. That is true. But I think it's also very possible to likely that everyone's evaluation of Bryce Young was pretty off, that he should not have been the number 1 overall pick, that he doesn't have a lot of special skills, and that what you saw in him was wrong ultimately. And there will be enough people out there that still believe in their evaluation to make a trade possible. Now, I looked and I thought, who's been as bad, on their first contract as a rookie and then got traded similar to this? Josh Rosen is really the only one statistically that's even in the same ballpark. The Dolphins actually gave up a late second for Josh Rosen. I forgot that.
Yeah.
That it was that good of a pick. I don't think you could get that for Bryce Young. I think he's like a mid-round pick, which is crazy. Like a 4th that could turn into a 3rd. You're not going to get much for Bryce Young.
But you have to try, and that's, again, why this is, I think, so public right now and happening right now. You have to try because also, if you are truly saying, and there's also some chatter sort of circulating about this over there as well, if this is what's best for Bryce as well as what's best for your football team, and it is the right decision for the football team, let's be clear on that. But you also can't say that and then have him sitting around as the backup or in your locker room, like as a reminder, and then also continue to kill his confidence by showing up to this place every single day. Like, you have to move him.
I feel like you're going to have to help Panthers fans again, like you did a couple episodes ago.
I want better for them. They deserve better.
Settle in. It's going to be a long ride.
I want them to have joy. I want them to have joy.
At least they have their first round pick this year, and it might be a high one. Let's take a quick break, and when we return, it is the return of Judge Connie.
Coming back.
Everyone is talking about the Honorable Colleen Wolfe, the go-to voice for everything football. Real cases, real solutions. She's Judge Connie.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the courtroom. Bailiff, I believe you have some things to say here.
Please rise.
Okay.
Yep. We're gonna do it. We're going through.
This is the height of hubris making me stand.
Well, not you. You're not the height of hubris. It's the height.
All right, order.
The court of the 3rd Judicial Circuit Civil Division is now in session. The Honorable Judge Connie presiding.
All right, everyone but the jury may be seated. As it turns out, I am judge and jury here. So, Mr. Roberts, please swear in the jury.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will truly listen to this case and render a true verdict and a fair sentence as to this defendant?
I do.
You may be seated.
All right. Here we go. Thank you guys for coming in here. I'd like to wrap things up by 4 o'clock. I got a detective I got to meet. So listen.
A lot of traffic out there on Prairie. So.
Oh my God. 4 lanes down to 1. Don't even get me started. They have no one directing traffic out there.
Objection, baiting the judge and jury.
All right. Sustained? So, I see today's case is the passing game versus Jim Harbaugh.
Mm-hmm.
Is the prosecution ready?
I am.
All right. Is the defense ready?
Sure.
All right. Let's begin.
All right. I want to take you back to 2020, a magical time. Justin Herbert's rookie year. I mean, there were some issues with 2020, let's be honest.
Not a magical year, Mr. Rosenthal.
I want to point out, in that 2020 season, Justin Herbert had the most yards passing per game, per start, in NFL history. I want to point out that he had the most passing touchdowns for a rookie in NFL history. More than Andrew Luck, more than Russell Wilson, more than Peyton Manning. There was a guy back then that I enjoyed watching, that I think all of America enjoyed watching, that threw the ball with a little daring do. There was that 65-yard pass from the Bucs against the Bucs while he's getting absolutely crushed in air to Jalen Guyton down for a touchdown. There were all these bombs to Mike Williams. He was the man. Now I want to take you to today. The Chargers have attempted 46 forward passes in the season. They have run the ball 71 times. Jim Harbaugh came in talking about balance. Like, where is the balance? It's all running. And then I can almost hear the defense talking now. Yes, but they're efficient. And Harbaugh loves to slap his shoulder pads. No, they're not efficient. He's throwing the ball worse than he's ever thrown the ball. 6 yards per attempt. 20th in the NFL in EPA. 20th in success rate. There isn't a stat you can find of Justin Herbert throwing the ball that is positive. They have turned him into Justin Fields throwing the ball, but without all the rushing fun. Let's go back to 2020, because we're here in the Chris Wesseling podcast courtroom. That season, I had the fortune of driving our friend Chris back from chemo to his house every week. Chris was still writing QB Index at the time. A lot of those conversations were about football. And Justin Herbert was a man, as a rookie, that was making us feel something. We would talk about Justin Herbert saying, like, this is the quarterback, since we've been doing this job, that moved us the most. So you can talk about your wins and your losses, but he connected with us on a spiritual, football, entertainment level. And this is an entertainment product. Now they've made him boring. I want that old Justin back. And Jim Harbaugh's not giving it to him.
Okay. Are there any would the defense like to speak now?
Yeah. Aside from the clear emotional manipulation of the previous argument, because Soup can picture it, right? Incredibly moved by that. It's being weaponized in this case against this argument. 2020, I recall also the time that the Chargers went 7-9. This arguer, lawyer, I don't know the right word, but this person arguing things right now, absolutely loves watching Justin Herbert throw the football. But it sounds like the argument on the other side is being made despite the disguise of true feelings and empathy, in actuality, for the sake of his perhaps fantasy football team or one of his few
didn't draft him.
fantasy football
Objection,
team.
sir.
Wow.
Because he doesn't
I drafted Kyler Murray and I'm living right.
Overruled?
Interrupting.
Yeah, come on.
Some sort of penalty on that,
Order.
Because regardless, he's thinking about it from that perspective, less so a game strategy perspective. You want balance? Let's talk about pin and pull and counter and duo and the gorgeous aerial footage of these tight ends who can block so effectively. They are restoring balance to this offensive line that will need to protect Justin Herbert should they actually play like a real football team and need to come out of a deficit and throw the football. This offensive line, these blockers, this run game will protect the Justin Herbert who recently was missing practice due to plantar fasciitis. Daniel Popper of The Athletic said he told reporters that he would be managing this all season. So I ask you this, why don't you want to protect Justin Herbert?
I do.
Instead of thinking about the flash of the ball sailing through the air. Look at the aerial shots of this run game. Look at the beauty of old school
Jim
football.
Harbaugh sold this whole idea on building
2-0.
a great offensive line.
I rest my argument. He's already closed my argument.
I've reached a decision. All right. The court does not need to hear anything further on this after not a lot of deliberating at all. I think here that the passing game versus Jim Harbaugh is not guilty, unfortunately, of making Justin Herbert boring because they are a 2-0 team and they are fun to watch. And just because Justin Herbert isn't exciting, Jim Harbaugh comes in, he's exciting. He fills that gap for me. So look,
run game.
Objection. There is no way Your Honor has watched these
I'm so sorry. Are
Chargers
you
games
questioning
and
the
found
court?
them exciting.
I find you in contempt of the court.
They make me feel alive.
The 30th in pass block win rate. Jim Harbaugh was selling this whole idea that the offensive line is going to be
Do you
fixed.
think
And I'm a
perhaps
little
that
surprised.
number is skewed a little bit because of the low sample size, or are we going to really go down this?
Maybe 31st in run block winner. I'm just saying, like, has their offensive line even played that well? I just want to see an effect. Like, give me at least an effective Herbert. He hasn't even been
130
effective.
passing yards. That was the second lowest in any game ever that Herbert has played. It's a different Justin Herbert. It's a different year, and there's been a league-wide shift in going towards the running game. So it's not just the Chargers that are doing this.
And you're going to have to throw the ball at some point for them to be the team that they want to be. But yeah, you mentioned 274 yards combined passing. He averaged more than that per game in his rookie year.
I'm just saying, I just remember a couple years ago when people were like frothing at the mouth to get Joe Lombardi and Kellen Moore up out of there. And like this is a different kind of football. Beauty looks different.
That's fair.
Everybody. We are all in football God's creatures, and all of our run schemes and passing schemes are beautiful.
Flowers don't compete with each other.
I just need more. Shane Steichen was his offensive coordinator back then. Anthony Lynn, his coach. And yeah, I was really thinking about those rides with Wes as I'm watching this Panthers-Chargers game on condensed, mostly
that is really nice, by the
way. And the coaches stuff. And I was watching it because of Bryce Young, and then I'm watching, and I'm just like, what happened to that guy? You know? Because we all thought, we meaning me and Wes, that like this is gonna be the next great quarterback. And he's been very good. He's been unquestionably a top 10 quarterback, maybe top 7 or 8. And we've blamed a lot of what's going on around him. And I think he's going to get there with Jim Harbaugh at some point.
They're going to have to throw the ball, and he will.
I know.
And this offense is built to have his back when he does have to start throwing the ball. That's the foundation they're laying right now. It's not that they're never going to run the ball until
I'm just disappointed. Can I be disappointed?
You can be disappointed
as a fan,
but
as an
change is
entertainer.
inevitable.
But legally,
if I was telling Wes this is how the next 5 years of Herbert's gonna go, I think he'd be like, oh, that was a letdown. I guess we were off.
I think we all are like, man, just throw the ball 100 times a game if you're Justin Herbert. But at the same time, that's not what's happening here.
It's working the way that they're doing it right now.
For now, and now they play the Steelers this week, which, final score prediction 9-7.
Oh,
love it.
I don't know who wins.
That's beautiful in its own way.
Right.
Not Gregg. He doesn't win. Okay. Miss Rodrigue, I believe that you are up next in your case for, why don't you tell the court? Why don't you enlighten the court?
The case for which 0-2 football team is going to turn things around. A case, by the way, in which the judge herself and the jury herself has made a significant preseason investment in a certain 0-2 team that we must decide now. So here are the list of 0-2.
This is very difficult for the judge to internalize.
The Colts?
Yes.
So here are the list of 0-2 teams.
Okay.
So the Ravens, the Panthers, the Bengals, the Broncos, the Colts, pause for effect, the Jaguars, the Rams, the Giants, the Titans. I argue that of any of these 0-2 teams, and because I'm doing this a little for the show as well, that the Bengals will be the team to turn this around. But I authorize the judge and the jury in this case, if she so chooses, to stick to her guns from the preseason prediction that the Indianapolis Colts would be a superstar team this year. I authorize the judge to overrule both arguments. My argument is that the Bengals will be the team of this group to turn this around. I need to see more data on Joe Burrow, but he played well against the Chiefs, as we hoped that he would. Talked about it on this show. But 3 of their next 4 games are Washington, Carolina, and the New York Giants. They could at least be 3-3 through 6 games. So I'm going to keep it simple. That's my simple argument.
Well, Ms. Rodrigue, I would say here that the Bengals are guilty of finding success. I think that will happen. Unfortunately, the court is a little upset that you are playing on the emotional heartstrings of the judge and jury. And I was already annoyed off the top of the show because of the Eagles.
Gregg did that. Okay, Gregg did that.
Now you both have crossed me.
I am wondering, like, oh, go on, please.
I am so upset by what I have watched from the Colts. I cannot render any type of decision at this point on the Colts because I want to believe in them still, and I can't just say no to them. But what I've seen, the evidence that's out there is really pointing to this season not being a great one.
I will say before Gregg makes his argument, and I did note that he started to interrupt you, but then pulled back.
Yeah.
He was trying to, curry favor, I think, on that one.
It's noted by the court.
5 seasons, only 2 teams, the 2023 Texans and the 2022 Bengals, have made the playoffs after 0-2 starts. And so the Bengals have been here before. Their schedule is a walk through a spring valley over the next few games, and I think they can do this again. Yeah,
a lot of the argument for the Bengals coming into the season was this 4th place schedule that they were going to get with really easy games, like starting out at home against the Patriots. You got to be worried about just chalking up wins on a, chalkboard.
I think we all knew, because you don't stop talking about it, that the Patriots were
going to
have a good defense.
There we go. I don't even think the prosecutor here understands sort of how this segment works. Like, who is the defendant? Who's
I am judge and jury.
The case.
That's what I know.
You get to decide just who's
the other lawyer in the courtroom
team.
Yeah.
I think it would be the Ravens.
Mr. Rosenthal.
The Ravens have the
audacity.
2023 MVP. Okay. If you simulated that game, they do this the former Football Outsiders, now they're on FDN, where it's like probability to win if you look at what happened in Sunday's game and you simulated it. Like, the Ravens easily outplayed the Raiders for all that game. It was a very fluky game. These things happen when Gardner Minshew goes to Baltimore for some reason. It happened a year ago when he was a member of the Colts, one of the craziest games of that season. And more to the point, it's September. These first couple of weeks are often lies, and the Ravens are consistently an organization that improves, especially defensively, as the season wears on. I'm not worried about the
data tells us that since 2015, 74 teams have started 0-2, and of those 74, 8 have made the playoffs. The 2 to do it recently, I have previously named. So it's not that 0-2 starts are actually not fluky based on.
Yeah, it is.
I also think
doom and gloom.
I also
stat.
think that that stat is fluky because it's counting 16-game seasons. To me, that stat is only kind of relevant in the last 3 years. So throw it out. It's out of order.
So the 2022 Bengals.
That would still work. That would still work.
Yeah, the Bengals always start slow. They'll figure it out. They'll get it going. I think the Ravens will too. The Colts just really not sure.
I dangled it as an option because I believe in the empowerment that you have as
Mr. Rodrigue. I know what you are doing here. All right.
I wouldn't give up on the Colts. The defense is more concerning to me than what's going on with Anthony Richardson. And the running game has looked pretty good. They've just missed a couple plays. They were right there with the Texans. I think their offense is going to be fine. The defense is a little.
All right, we got to move on to our next case here. Go. Okay. Next on the docket, we have the Super Bowl versus the New Orleans Saints.
She didn't even make a ruling because the case was so vague.
I said that
she said Jourdan Wolfe.
That was like Connie style.
That the Bengals are guilty of
finding
finding success.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
I'm 2-0. I just want to let you know.
All right, Super Bowl versus
You're not
going to
win this one. All right, I am going to make a case for the Saints as Super Bowl contenders.
Okay.
I barely need to make a case. I'll just show you the newspaper if those still exist. Like, just show you the facts. The 4th best DVOA through 2 weeks ever. That's just total efficiency. Offense, defense. Number 1 in offense by far, almost double the rest of the league. Number 3 on defense. If you look at the rest of the top 10s in terms of the first 2 weeks of the season of like who's been the best through 2 weeks, the average win total for those 10 teams over the course of a season is 13. So by average, if you start this well, you end up about a 13-3, 13-4 season. Any team that wins 13 games is a Super Bowl contender. The eye test, it's just there. They're cohesive. You watch the running game. They're just moving. It's fantastic. They've got leaders on the defense with Demario Davis, Honey Badger. Alontae Taylor is playing out of his mind. And then there's something they call in New Orleans, Creole culture, lanyap. It's just like a little extra.
Mr. Rosenthal, can you explain to the court what this is?
Okay. It's like Supreme Justice Potter Stewart said what lanyap is, rather. Lanyap is it's just a little extra. It's like a little extra something. Could be like a little extra gift.
How is that spelled exactly?
LANGNIAPPE. Pretty good. I don't know if that was right or not, but I tried. Just a little something extra. And this team has that. You can just tell by looking at them. They've just got a certain energy, a certain sort of juice. It's like I was saying, Supreme Justice Potter Stewart, one of your old coworkers, said about porn, actually, in the 1964 Supreme Court case, Jacobellis versus Ohio. You know it when you see it. And we all see it with this Saints team.
What a great reference. Okay, so Ms. Rodrigue?
Oh, actually, Gregg's arguing against himself. So.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful.
So he'll win one. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I'm torn about this Saints team. I'm going to argue against this Saints team, too.
Okay.
I don't know.
This is so confusing.
What is happening here? We're in extended preseason. Everyone talks about like the preseason matters. Like, am I really going to fall for this Saints team? That 2 weeks ago, no one liked this Saints team. They were totally forgotten. The coaches all wanted, the fans all wanted the coaches fired. No one was happy with Derek Carr. It's Derek Carr. We do have like a 10-year track record here with Derek Carr. Do we really want to believe in it? Trevor Penning, everyone's talking about him as like, okay, it's this great rejuvenation story. PFF has him ranked 58th out of 71 qualifiers in terms of his pass protection. At some point, they are going to have to pass protect and not just win, scored 30.
All over the place.
I mentioned that DVOA stat earlier. Some of the teams ahead of them on that list include the 2019 Patriots. Remember them? Tom Brady's last season there. They started out 7-0. They totally petered out. The Miami Dolphins over the last few years. You remember like how they started a house on fire? These teams were interesting. They were kind of fun. They weren't real Super Bowl contenders in the end. This is just a fun story. Furthermore, the prosecutor went to Tulane and had season tickets to the Saints back in the 90s, so he's biased.
Can the judge and jury object here? I would like to object to that.
I'm dying to see who wins. I hope it's Gregg.
Okay, so Mr. Rosenthal, what you're saying is Derek Carr will finally get a playoff win in this. Yeah, correct? Okay. I will say that the court did think coming into the season that the Saints seemed to be one of the most boring teams in the NFL in terms of pop and storylines and excitement. And then once the season started, it's been the complete opposite. No offense has looked better. Now Clint Kubiak is being crowned as like the best play caller. Derek Carr is being aggressive. He's taking shots downfield. Their offensive line can cover up some of those liabilities in the pass protection with the ground game that they have. And Alvin Kamara has been insane. He's been great. Sure, the defense is older, but they're wiser. And you mentioned so many of these players. Cam Jourdan obviously is a cornerstone of this defense, but don't forget about Demario Davis. He seems to be one of the most underrated linebackers in the entire league. They're stacked with versatile DBs. I can't decide how winnable this division is because the Bucs and Baker Mayfield, they look good again. And then what the Falcons did to the Eagles, can't really talk about it.
What happened?
I shudder. I shudder. But
it's a Super Bowl contender, though. Just a Super Bowl contender.
Super
That's
Bowl
all we're saying.
I hope you win this, Gregg.
Yeah.
Contender. We, judge and jury, in the case of the Super Bowl versus the New Orleans Saints, find the Saints guilty of being contenders.
Yeah.
Gregg
there we go.
Gregg, you won.
There we go.
Rosenthal v. Rosenthal. What a joy it was.
What a win for you.
To watch Gregg
go at Gregg.
The two
debate
sides.
himself.
It's the two sides.
I got to witness that. I feel joy.
This is that team that's like, I don't know what to do with this, like 2 weeks. And that's why I was like, when I thought about them, it's like you could present either side so strongly.
Yeah,
but they have been fun. Like, if you wanted to make a negative, maybe you could say Clint Kubiak, first week's Panthers, and then second week is Mike Zimmer, a guy he saw operate in Minnesota when he was his offensive coordinator for 3 years in the building. But they passed the eye test. I like being so dumb.
I know how much you love the Saints too. Like when you talk about New Orleans, it's just a whole separate thing.
I just think it's great to approach this the same you would on like Pink Floyd on DVD. Pop a gummy and enjoy the ride. This Saints team is fun. Lean into it.
So fun. Okay. We have a final case. We're getting right up against it, so we're not going to take a whole lot of time on this one. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. It is the postseason versus the NFC West, I believe, Ms. Rodrigue?
Correct, and I think there's been a shift in hierarchy due to the combination of multi-week injuries suffered by previous favorites, Rams and 49ers, to key players, and a increase in productivity and performance and excitability-ness in the Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. I am arguing today to the judge, the jury, and also against Gregg, that the Seahawks and the Cardinals are going to be the premier teams in the NFC West down the stretch. And I also wonder, Judge Connie, if weeks 12 and 14 will even decide the NFC West when these two teams play each other. And again, in consideration of multi-week losses to previous favorite star players. Geno Smith is playing lights out. He had probably his best game. Gregg and I were texting about it when I was watching.
Gregg was talking about Geno Smith?
You know, it just was like one of those, you like set a match in and just like light it off and it just goes, right? And so, but he played with, and I even texted him, I said, I like to kind of keep a unbiased, like middle perspective when I'm looking at quarterbacks, and I felt alive watching Geno Smith play this last week. He was pressured so fast at nearly constantly on his dropbacks, but he showed no rattle. Good decisions, mostly sharp, really clean throws. The manipulation and the control he showed over the way that they go tempo, the way that they move around some of the formations in that offense. He's feeding the ball around to multiple receivers. 9th in EPA per play through 2 weeks, per dropback per 2 weeks. And 5th, despite that pressure, in success rate, 51.3%. And then there's Kyler Murray and the Cardinals offense. And by the way, the Seahawks defense will keep growing up. The adjustments Mike McDonald made at halftime against New England, I thought were really impressive. They basically took away the only way they were getting gashed and then said, all right, you're going to run the ball against us. We understand that, but we're going to take away your passing game. And then by moving some different assignments around. And then Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, you know, I don't know that the defense will sustain what it did against a very depleted Rams team, but this offense is built not just to win right now, but also to win in November and December and January and February because of all the different ways that they can run the ball and the way that Kyler Murray can create on the run. I've not seen him play like this in person yet. And he is alive in Drew Petzing's offense. Drew Petzing calls a smart game. He understands how to attack defenses. And they're moving this heavy personnel run game all around the line in terms of their attack points on these defenders. Yes, the Rams defensive line is terrible, and it showed in this game, but they can do this to opponents. We have seen this down the back half of last season, and they came out swinging. I think that these two teams are taking over as the premier teams in the NFC West this year alone. And Kyler is 3rd in EPA per drop back in the NFL, 0.40. And then success percentage, he's also 3rd, 54.7 success rate on passing plays. I mean, that's just outstanding. Through 2 games, I understand, but the way that these guys play is sustainable.
Your Honor, the prosecutor has a case of having too much dip on her chip. I mean, she said February.
Let me be clear. Let me be clear.
February for these Arizona Cardinals.
Let me be clear. You can.
She said it. It's in the court.
All right, order. My God.
Let me be clear. So we're not misleading here. Running the ball in that fashion is what wins you games in February.
The only way you can play in February is if you're going to make the Super Bowl. And I can understand saying that the Seahawks are a real postseason threat. I agreed with that before the season even started. But to essentially replace the 49ers with the Cardinals is a step too far. This defense is very shorthanded up front and on the back end. Two very important parts of your defense, I would say, among the least talented defenses in the entire NFL. Totally agree that they could be a sneaky playoff contender, but that doesn't mean that the 49ers are going to fall apart. Despite all the injuries for the 49ers, may I present honor some players still on the field for the 49ers.
Sure.
Brandon Ayuk, second-team All-Pro last year. Juwan Jennings, sneaky great wide receiver in terms of blocking. Trent Williams, the best tackle on the planet. All these players would be better than just about anyone on the Cardinals except for Kyler Murray. Hey, how about the quarterback who led the number one EPA per play offense in the NFL last year and delivered series after series in the freaking Super Bowl when he needed to try to win the Super Bowl? That's Brock Purdy. He's still around. George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. These are all pros after all pros. This team has had injuries before, Charvarius Ward, and they have a great coaching staff, including Kyle Shanahan. I hear you on the whole Seahawks. I even like
So
Cardinals
you'll acquiesce the Seahawks, but not the Cardinals.
But it says it even says the real postseason threats. I would even go with Seahawks, Cardinals, and 49ers are real postseason threats.
I would agree with that.
But wording is important in the courtroom, and I think it was just a little too loose, especially when that February word came out.
Okay.
The February word that was misinterpreted by my opponent here, by the way.
I'll allow it. I will allow it.
They've dealt with injuries, yeah, but they've not dealt with Achilles tendonitis for their star player. That's all I'm saying. That's a sketchy one.
All right. Well, I think the Cardinals and the Seahawks, they are for sure real threats in the division, partially because they are healthy right now. The Rams have just been obliterated with injuries. This is already Sean McVay's, first time starting 0-2. Probably 0-3 because they're playing the Niners this week, but we'll see. Crazier things have happened. San Francisco feels a little bit off, but I would like to attribute that to the injuries. Jordan Mason has done an admirable job filling in for Christian McCaffrey, but just obviously not the same. The defense will still keep them in games, but maybe they're not the threat that we thought they were. But I'm just saying, as where we stand right now after 2 weeks, the Seahawks, though, that defense looks completely different from last season. They are so aggressive. They're flying to the ball. Like you said, those halftime adjustments were insane. That defensive line is so good when they are healthy. They are absolutely stacked with talent. And then Geno Smith, he is supremely underrated, Gregg. And at
this point, it's not even underrated.
Well,
everyone
not
to
in
know.
this room, not in this courtroom. The Cardinals are absolutely electric with Kyler Murray at this point, and I haven't seen him play this well in years and years. Watching that game on Sunday, he looked so good. The offense was insane the way it moved so well. It reminded me of some of those games where Kyler Murray would pull out like a Hail Mary at this, right at the end. I feel like it was how many years ago? It was before
against the Bills, who he also looked good against in week 1.
Yes. The defense is a potential weak spot, though, for the Cardinals. That's where I start to worry. But they are all over the place in week 2, making plays against the Rams when you go back and watch the film. So maybe Gannon has them cooking and can elevate the ceiling on them. But we, the jury and the judge, in the case of the postseason versus the NFC West, we find the Cardinals and Seahawks not guilty of rising to the top of the division. And it is because I am split with the Cardinals and the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks will rise up in the division, but I still believe in the Niners. So I think it'll end up being somewhere between the Seahawks and the Niners up top, and then Cardinals and Rams.
Can't truly argue with the honorable judge and respected jury.
That is correct there. In this courtroom.
Yeah, that the 49ers are always dangerous, even when you think they're not.
Right.
They are always dangerous. I 100% agree with that. I just think they're in a bit of uncharted territory with the amount of time that some of these players, some of the situation, particularly with stars, might be able to just hinder their season, delay their progress a little bit. You catch momentum at the right time in this league. That's important. And by the way, the Cardinals
just take that L.
The Cardinals, the way that they I technically still won this because you argued against yourself. So
it's a fair point.
So the Cardinals, the way that they're able to run the ball, the multiplicity with the way they're able to run the ball, that's going to just smother people. That's reminiscent of the Kyle Shanahan suffocation 49ers. That's just darkness right there. Like that's going to take this team to the postseason, regardless of what it does not matter how your defense is if you could play keep away from the other side, which is what they almost did to the Bills and what they will continue to try to do to opponents down the stretch.
I do remember that 49ers team from a couple years ago, 2021, that started 3-5. Oh. And they were a dropped interception in the NFC Championship game against the Rams from making the Super Bowl that year and having a real chance to win it. I think of their team last year that lost a couple games in the middle of the season in a row. Granted, they had a little cushion in terms of their record at that point, but they lost a couple games in a row when they had injuries.
Their offensive line is also struggling outside of Trent. Like I'm wondering if we're going to see more of these bad games from Brock Purdy too.
Yeah, it might have been a Brian Flores thing. They'll have a much better matchup this week against the Rams. Although the Rams always find a way to play them close. This will be a challenge. All right, Judge Connie.
Great work.
I respect you. I admire you.
I got to get out of here. It's 4:01.
I'm looking forward to season 3. Get that syndication deal going. We will be back after this with a little quick break, and we're going to do a TNF preview, Jets and Patriots. Time now for your Door to More, presented by DoorDash. It's our TNF preview. It's the Patriots heading to the Meadowlands to face the New Jersey Jets. Almost said Nets. I'm thankful to the Patriots for showing up these first couple weeks and being a representative, interesting football team and making this Thursday night football rivalry game interesting. I know they wanted to put the Patriots early. They don't have any other prime times like before the bottom fell out, and they look like a real team to me. I am concerned, Colleen, that their passing game is as bad as expected.
Yeah.
Actually. Like, I know they got Hunter Henry over 100 yards last week, but any measurement you want to look at or any eyeball test that I've been looking at in terms of the pass protection, it is that big of a problem that, when your left tackle gets benched and then thinks about retiring and leaves the team, like that's usually
Dante Scarnecchia would never.
Yeah, it's usually a bad sign. They're 28th in yards per play. They are dead last in pass block win rate, second worst pressure rate allowed, and their average separation is 28th. So when I watched this film, Jacoby Brissett, I think, has played well enough. He hasn't been the issue. There aren't a lot of open receivers here. And it's a tough matchup against a Jets secondary where they've got the players. Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed and CJ Mosley, by the way, are all considered kind of day-to-day and might be game-time decisions. So that's a big factor here. But if they're healthy, this is a Jets team that I think can feel with confidence. We can just man up against your receivers.
What about Ramondre Stevenson?
Okay.
And
there we go. That's the strength. That's the strength.
This is the strength of the team. They are run heavy now. He's the entire offense, Ramondre Stevenson. This is the second straight week he had 20-plus carries, and that's where the Jets are susceptible on the ground, allowing an average of 115 yards per game through these two. So like 4.5 yards per carry. Also, the 6th most receiving yards to opposing runners, which not Ramondre's wheelhouse, but that could mean that Antonio Gibson gets involved too. So if they're going to have success, it's going to be on the ground. I don't know how viable that will continue to be because defenses will obviously be keying, but it's like right now, it's been working for them, and they're exciting. And obviously, Jacoby Brissett, he's limited in what he can do.
I don't know that the Jets have shown a capability of keying in against to stop the run. They've just been really porous in terms of allowing that significant volume. It's something like 130 yards allowed in week 2, 180 yards allowed in week 1. I mean, that's just enormous amounts of holes found by these running backs. And I think that if you are trying to keep the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands, which you should be, because even though he's clearly still kind of getting back to his physical form, looked better last week. They also helped him out a lot with the quick game, helped mitigate some of their own offensive line issues with the quick game. We'll get to that in a minute. But if you're trying to play keep away from Aaron Rodgers, your game plan has to be to load up and run the ball if you're the Patriots. And there really is not another game plan. And to add to the list too, Michael Carter with the ankle.
Right.
Also, to me, one of the best inside corners in the NFL. He's dealing with the ankle and he's limited this week. So, and he's also been managing it. So he might not play a full snap count. So again, if you are shorthanded even on the inside and the linebacker situation, you're really going to have to like smash the ball into this Jets front because they haven't proved that they can stop it.
Mm-hmm. And they're without Jermaine Johnson, who tore his Achilles. They're obviously without Hassan Reddick.
That was so sad.
Yeah, that's really sad. And Mosley, to me, is so important for what they do. I misspoke earlier. I'm glad you corrected when I said Sauce Gardner is Michael Carter, who would be kind of a game time decision potentially for this. So that's really important. But again, Ramondre's playing so well. Antonio Gibson had one of the best games of his career. I've always been an Antonio Gibson fan from his days in Washington, and it kind of got like worse and worse. And like breaking tackles is not exactly an offense, but that's basically what they've been doing. It hasn't been that the run blocking's been great. It's been up and down, but they do have some plays where they look like they kind of know what they're doing. And I do love that they'll break out 7 offensive linemen at once. They'll just go crazy jumbo. They'll go 6 offensive linemen at once. Like that's who they are. They're trying to keep it close, and you can win that way if you don't make mental mistakes, which they did in the fourth quarter and overtime of that game. Before that, they played 3 really clean quarters and were this close to being 2-0. I mean, they're in field goal range with 4 minutes left to go, up 3 with a chance to maybe go up 10. So they've done a lot of good things. Their defense, let's talk about that matchup against the Jets offense and Rodgers. Can they get any pressure on Rodgers? Rodgers is 4 for 10 for 26 yards against pressure. And you might be saying like, well, that's not very good. That's obviously at the bottom of like any sort of metrics you want to look at. But the thing that stands out to me is 10, that he's only been pressured on 10 plays. He also has 0 passes this year outside the tackle box. So like no creation. So a lot of the things we said about Kirk Cousins coming out of week 1 are true to the other guy coming off a torn Achilles. It's just not quite as dramatic. But when you guys watch him, does he look like Aaron Rodgers? No, because the old Aaron Rodgers created. Now, Aaron Rodgers, I think, has been better than Kirk in aggregate in terms of he's getting rid of the ball. And I do have more faith in the Jets winning this game because of the second half of that game that they did kind of lock down defensively in terms of their run stopping. And Rodgers made 3 or 4 just fantastic one-on-one throws to his receivers. And I came out of that game thinking like, okay, the second half of that game, like he got his mojo back. We'll see if that continues, but I felt a lot better about him after watching that.
I'm sorry. I'm just writing down okay for Patriots to load up and run ball, not okay for Chargers to load up.
Yeah, well, because one team has Justin freaking Herbert,
I know.
and the other has Jacoby Brissett.
You lost your mind there for a second. I had to do that. You lost your mind there.
It worked.
I do think to your Rodgers point,
One's
Greg,
got like my
put the quarter in and see what happens.
Yeah, my grandfather's 91 Subaru
Greg,
XL.
do you want to take a lap? You gonna be all right?
The other's got like a Ferrari.
Breathe, Greg. Okay. So to your point, yes, they are helping him too, and maybe Aaron is helping himself if he's like calling these games, right? But
kind of he probably
is, exactly. But
the
quick game that they're using, it's helping him. It's not just helping avoid that pressure. It's obviously keeping his air yardage pretty short, which is strange to see from Aaron Rodgers. It's only 5 passes over 10 air yards, which is the 3rd lowest for him since 2016.
In the whole season, only 5?
Per next.
Wow. Oh my God.
Stats. So, but they're going.
Now, 3 of them were dimes that were huge plays. The Breece Hall touchdown, the Garrett Wilson completion.
He can still do it, but they're clearly trying to protect him and get him into a rhythm as he gets his like literal legs back under him. So this was interesting. Again, per next gen, 18 passes under 2.5 seconds, getting the ball out super fast. Went 13 of 18 for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns in this last game. And it's interesting because that mitigates pressure on the offensive line. I'm not confident that the Jets can amass, or excuse me, I'm not confident that that's going to make such a difference in this game. The state of the Jets offensive line. But I think that, getting him into a rhythm like that and getting him like feeling good, feeling like moving, feeling like things are clicking, I think you'll start to see him open up a little bit more. I don't know if this is the game to do it though, because you're trying to just get a clean win out of this one.
I do think that Breece Hall and maybe even Braylon Allen are the focal point. It's a ball control offense, and they're sort of saving Rodgers for those big third downs and like the end of half plays. And Garrett Wilson, he still hasn't scored a touchdown yet. There's like different things I think that you can point to with both of these teams, how the Jets defense can just blow things up. And it's something that they should be able to do against the Patriots this week with that offensive line. That D front going up against the Pats O-line, which the Pats O-line for so long was like their strong suit in Foxborough. And so now I'm just looking at both run games because both teams are sort of shifting to a run-first approach. So it's going to be which one has the ball longer.
So the Patriots, I think, will play them similarly to the Titans, which is the Titans didn't stack the box. Like Breece Hall is loving life with Aaron Rodgers. That is the difference between this year and last year in terms of like what their running game is facing. And the Patriots lost Juwan Bentley, who's a good run stopper for them, and they will count on their guys to just do it. But if I had to pick a defense in this game, like which defense do I trust more? It's close. They're both veteran groups that have played together a while. I think Jourdan Mayo's done some really good disguises in terms of how they change before the snap and after the snap.
Keon White.
Keon White has 4 sacks this season, a lot of really quick pressures last week too. And they play like a veteran group that's in sync. I think the Jets do too on the back end, but I think the Patriots are actually a little better up front. I brought up the line here while we were talking because I was like, I'm curious what it is.
Yeah.
Because I'm confident the Patriots are just going to ugly this thing up and keep it close. At this point, I think these two teams have looked pretty average. If you look at like the DVOA through 2 weeks, I know it's only 2 weeks. They're both just right in the middle of the NFL. That's how they've played. And so I would think they'd keep it close. So 6.5 to me is way too much for the Jets. I like the Patriots to keep it close, but the Jets to ultimately win in a matchup where, man, even at the very end of the Belichick era, the Jets were struggling to ever find wins against the Patriots. So I do think they get one here at home, but I like the Patriots to cover at least.
Yeah, I think
not that you have to pick that. I just found that interesting. 6.5. I feel pretty strong about that.
Yeah, I think that's too much, or I don't really know how to describe this type of thing. You explain this to me all the time. I don't know anything.
I could see the Patriots if you can
the lines,
easily
the lines and the I don't. That's my huge weak spot. But I do think that they're going to keep it closer than what that says. I think because I think
they could win
because I think the Patriots are going to go try to keep away from Aaron Rodgers, like I said at the very top. But I do think the Jets are going to win this game.
Jets too. So we're sweeping.
Yeah.
I'm 0-2, by the way. I am the curse.
Last week was a bad week for everyone.
I do think, there are some matchup issues. Christian Gonzalez is playing well in the secondary, but one-on-one, some of these Patriots cornerbacks I think can be a little more vulnerable.
But if the Patriots do win, because things have been so good for them unexpectedly, do we end up seeing Drake May a little sooner than expected?
Sooner?
Not with that line. No way I would do it.
No, I think this is the best of both worlds for them. They're like they're confirming why they're not playing him in a way, and they're setting the foundation, and they're winning some games. And
they're literally like, why is everyone yelling? We're right.
That is awesome. Jourdan and Colleen, what a day. Judge Connie.
Truly,
are we going to let
a great one.
Colleen pick?
I said the Jets.
You did.
Okay.
You did.
I'm just, you know what? I'm trying to curry points. More
I know,
points,
but we're done. We're done in the courtroom.
Yeah, Judge Connie
After
will
I
be
beat Gregg,
returning at some point. We'll see if it's a regular season thing, postseason. Who knows?
Anything could happen.
I know I'm doing court for jury duty in a month. That's not happening. So I got to figure out how to get out of that because I've already delayed it a couple times. Thanks for watching NFL Daily, presented by DoorDash. Yes, we will be back on Thursday for our preview show. Excited about that. Steve Weiss, Patrick Claybon, every single week, going through every single team and game except for these TNF teams. So looking forward to that, and we will see you guys next time. When Judge Connie's in session, you know that football is back.
Thanks, bailiff.